Hello, and welcome to the Music Therapy and Beyond podcast. Today we will be exploring improvisation and jazz with Harry Beckett. We hope you will feel inspired at the end of this episode to sit down at the piano and start exploring new ways to play. Let's get started. Welcome back to the podcast, Harry.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. This is a fun place to be. I had a great time working with Giving Song. Gosh, I don't know how long, several months ago, putting together another podcast. And we just talked about life in general and about music making and music therapy and kind of my overall passion for using music to help people with therapeutic goals.
Absolutely. And it was a really good episode. So I'll be sure to link that in our show notes so that people can go back and listen to it because you had a lot of really valuable things to say. I'm really excited to have you here because you and I have known each other for a very long time.
Yes.
For the listeners that don't know, Harry and I got our bachelor's degrees in music therapy together at Drury University in Springfield, Missouri, more than 15 years ago now, which is kind of hard to believe that it's been that long.
Time flies by when you're having fun.
It really flies by. Holy cow.
Yeah.
So we know each other very well.
Yes.
And the conversation that we're going to have today is really a conversation that we would just have if we were going out to dinner together and talking shop.
Right.
So just talking
Or
about
coffee.
or
Coffee really gets our brain going. For
Yes,
sure.
it's just a conversation that we would have any other time, and we just thought that might be valuable for our listeners because you are such an experienced musician, I would say prodigy level, genius level piano player, and so I really wanted our listeners
You're way
to
too
have...
kind.
Yeah, well, I don't think so. I think it's pretty true. But I think it'd be great for everybody to just benefit from some of your knowledge and expertise because you just have a lot to offer. So what I would love for you to do to start us off is for those that have not listened to the previous episode to learn about you is to just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to music therapy.
Well, I've been a professional musician for many years, and I don't want to reveal my age. I think I just turned 28.
That sounds right.
Yeah, that's right. Well, plus 40. Okay, plus 4. Oh, I have to admit. Anyway, no, I have. I hate getting old. You know, musicians have this sense of vanity. But anyway, not to get off the subject, but no, music has been such a part of my life throughout the years. And what kind of brought me into music therapy, that was kind of like later in life. I just found that music has a really healing power on people. And I did some work at started working in the hospital. I was a student in radiologic technology, believe it or not, before I even got into the music therapy curriculum. And I just found that I had an opportunity to do some volunteer performing of music in the hospital. And I went to the cancer wing and even the neonatal intensive care unit and the post-surgical wing and the cardiac rehab. I mean, all these different units, psychiatric unit as well. But what I found is that just being myself and just sharing music and that love of music and that, but also just an affection for the other person. I think that came across. There was a magical event happening. I mean, there was the people responded. People who were listless were kind of smiling and just coming alive again. They were starting to remember things that maybe they hadn't remembered in a while. They were sharing very personal experiences, emotional expression of things that maybe they hadn't shared with their family. And that's just the power of music to awaken things. So anyway, those experiences kind of awakened me to kind of make a change in my career from just being a professional musician of many years, playing many different genres of music, playing in bands and traveling around the world and all that, that I just want to use music to help with the healing process and help people live a higher quality life. So it was that time that I was very fortunate to get a grant from the Hospice Foundation Board of Springfield, Missouri, and with the intent of going to Drury University to enter in their music therapy curriculum. And of course, that's where I met the beautiful Elizabeth. Well, it was a different name at the time before it's Shane, but I mean, anyway, so that was an important part of my life. I just found that getting the training in methods and techniques of what music therapists do just added a whole new dimension of my life that just needed to be there because it's great to perform, but what's really more important is that your performing can communicate to other people and hopefully reach out to them and help them have a better quality of life. I could go on and on just about that topic, but we'd never get onto some of the other fun topics we're going to talk about today.
True. Well, and we know that you have a heart for just helping people to really find the music within themselves, find joy, find healing, find quality of life. And we know that as music therapists that our music skills is one of our primary tools that we use to do that. And when we have better skills as musicians, we're better able to communicate with other people musically and to really help them to find the music. And so I think that the topic today is really exciting because we all get stuck sometimes as music therapists. We get in a rut musically. We're not sure what to do or how to grow, but we know that we need to keep growing and learning. And so I'm excited to talk to you about improvisation and jazz techniques today. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your philosophy around improvisation and why that's important for a music therapist.
Well, I think everybody in the world, even people who aren't musically trained, naturally improvise, first of all. How many times have you heard people working out in the shop or washing dishes or outside? I mean, male or female, it doesn't matter. People of all ages. Many people sometimes just whistle a tune or hum, whatever. That's improvisation. Now, sometimes people choose a very definite, familiar song, but I think most people take liberties even when if they're singing "You Are My Sunshine" in the shower, "You Are My Sunshine," they're going to put their own personality into it, and so that's just being themselves. And so my philosophy is that improvisation is just like language. When you and I are having this improvisatory talk, we're just chilling out, having a bit of a conversation. And that needs to be done in music. And I think music therapists, this is extremely important, as important for music therapists as it is for professional musicians who improvise. In some ways, it's even more important for music therapists. And many music therapists are interested, in building repertoire. And that's something that, you got to start with the basics. You got to build a repertoire of songs in different genres of music. You have to cater it to your clients and to your demographics who you're working with. But you also need to develop skills, fundamental skills that will enable you to improvise. And how do you do that? Well, that's a whole other topic. Are you ready to talk about that?
I mean, absolutely. I think really what we'd like to do is be able to just jump in and improvise with you. But like you said, we've got to be able to have the basics to be able to do that. So let's start with the basics. What's something that we need to know to start with about music, the structure of music? What's an important thing to understand if you're going to improvise in a certain style?
Okay. First of all, let me just say, you need to be listening to the music that you're trying to emulate, whether it's jazz, blues, rock, country music, whatever. You just can't learn it academically. You just don't read a book and it says, okay, this is the formula for doing blues or doing that. That's not that way. I mean, now there are some great textbooks out there which give you some great starters, and I'm going to talk about one of them here a little bit later on. But the important thing is that you just like when you took lessons as a piano player, a guitar player, trumpet player, saxophone player, vocalist, whatever, you learn some basics about theory. So theory is real important. You need to understand, to be able to play well in any genre of music, you got to have a good foundation of rhythm. Rhythm is the basic of everything. That's what the African cultures taught us when they came, in the old days. And I mean, many cultures around the world, rhythm is the basis of their culture. So you've got to feel those rhythms, and that's a big complex subject which we could go on all day just talking about rhythm. But another
Well,
thing, yeah,
I was
go
just going
ahead.
to say, I mean, that's what connects us to other humans is that we are all naturally rhythmic. We have rhythm
Yes,
within our
right,
bodies, our heartbeats are rhythmic. So if we don't have rhythm,
hmm,
we're not going anywhere because
exactly,
that's the structure, that's the glue that's going to hold everything else
right.
together. So I think that's a really important thing
And
to
then, so
emphasize.
I want to say something about the basics of music. And, we've all been taught this. Anybody that took a course in music theory or appreciation of music, there's some basic things. Okay, rhythm is one of the basics of music. Also, melody is a real
Mm-hmm.
important. And so, how do you learn melody? Well, melody is something in improvisation, especially. You really got to know your like all your scales
Mm-hmm.
in different types of scales, major,
Mm-hmm.
minor. You got diminished scales. You got your Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian. I mean, we can go on and on about different modes
Mm-hmm.
that can enhance your. So what it does, it builds vocabulary,
Yeah.
and in melody, it has a contour to it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of it's like when we're speaking, we have intonation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, how are you doing? That's melody.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to translate that in music. So you have rhythm, you have melody, and melody communicates the heart,
Mm-hmm.
those heartfelt feelings you have. Then you have harmony. Harmony is
Mm-hmm.
the third component. What good is it to play a bunch of a nice melody without some chords,
Yep. Gets pretty bland after a
it
while.
gets yeah, you want to have chords that give it that foundation
Mm-hmm.
underneath it. And so you have to practice some basics. And if you're learning jazz, there's a whole bunch of textbooks, for example, that give you that foundation in jazz harmony,
Mm-hmm.
rhythm structures, melodic structures, and so
Mm-hmm.
forth.
And I think that that is probably what is intimidating to me and other music therapists who weren't raised or spent many years playing jazz is that theory piece that it's a little intimidating to think about learning jazz theory. And so then you kind of get overwhelmed and you're like, oh, never mind. Maybe that's just not for me. So I know you've mentioned a couple different resources to me, and we're going to link those in the show notes so that people can look them up. But what would you say is your favorite textbook, favorite resource for somebody that's
Well,
trying to learn and just get started?
yes. Okay, so I'm holding a book, and that is put out by, this is one I've had for years. And I like this book. There's actually a number of textbooks out there. You can go online and
Mm-hmm.
look under jazz improvisation. When this series came out, it was written by a guy named Jamey Ebersold out
Mm-hmm.
of Evansville, Indiana. And he became so successful. He came up with 25, 30 books
Mm-hmm.
that he cranked out back in I don't remember the years it started, probably back in the 80s and 1990s is when he started doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But he just takes people step by step, learning simple things, starting off like as though you're a first grader in
Mm-hmm.
playing and building that comfort level. And that's the thing I want to emphasize. Too many people want to rush the experience,
Mm-hmm.
the learning process of improvising. How many times do you go into a music store and somebody picks up a guitar or keyboard and they're just so anxious to make a sound out of that, and they're just trying to run their fingers over it. They don't have any training, they don't have any confidence about what they're
Mm-hmm.
doing. They want to sound impressive, and so they try to rush the process. And I think that's what happens with people with improvising. A lot of, I think, therapists or just musicians are intimidated by improvisation because they're so used to just reading notes on a page.
Yep.
Everything has to be written out for it. See, that inhibits you.
Mm-hmm.
What the music, the sheet music, written notes can give you a guide from which you can go beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you do that? You do it by building that confidence, and the way to do that is a little at a time.
Mm-hmm.
A person doesn't build superhuman strength overnight. You got to go to the gym for maybe years and years to build up of that level. And same thing with music and improvising. It is a live process. I still feel like I am a beginner. As many years as I've been doing this, I'm always learning new things. So the idea, take a deep breath, not be in a rush, and just enjoy the ride. And this is find the joy in the simplicity of the simplest improvisation. I'm going to demonstrate something here in a minute.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that will really help our listeners to have some demonstration today. And we're going to give a few different examples because really there are some basic steps that can be taken to start building that comfort level that you're talking about. There are some ways that we can work on that. So maybe we could do that now. Maybe we could just jump into an example from this book that you shared with us. We've got a track we can play.
Yes, and the name of this book, and you might go online. There might be a new title, but this book was called A New Approach to Jazz Improvisation, and it was Volume 1 by Jamey Ebersold.
So there may be new additions, or there may be some additional resources similar to this, but we'll link this one for sure in case people want the OG. And for anybody that's very into TikTok and internet, there are so many wonderful tutorials and channels online now. There's actually one on TikTok that I follow that's just called Jazz Tutorial. And it's just a guy that hops on there and shares different tricks and riffs and things like that. And I love just watching that and just seeing what he does, what he comes up with. And it makes me feel inspired. So I'm hoping that we can find lots of resources for our listeners as we go along, because whatever works for their brains is what I hope that they can find so that they don't feel stuck and they have somewhere to start. So tell us a little bit about your example before I hit the play button on this.
Okay, so this is an example where this is the very first example in the book on the track. And it's all done, it's 24 bars in 4/4 time. And the first 8 bars is jamming in the key of F Dorian minor. Now you say, what's Dorian minor? Well, let me just say, there's many modes you need to learn, but just as a refresher for anybody that ever had this in theory, if you're playing in the key of C, for example, from C to C to C is a C major scale.
Right.
The Dorian minor starting on D is all the white keys, as though you're playing the C major scale, but starting on D. That's one of the most popular scales in jazz. Not the harmonic minor. That's what we hear here. That's just traditional classical music, but in jazz, just that little difference. That's D Dorian in minor. So just knowing that, and so this example is taking 3 chords. The first 8 bars is an F minor 7th chord in the left hand, and then it's the F minor Dorian scale. And we're going to jam on that for 8 bars. And then for the second set of 8 bars, we're going to jam on an E flat minor Dorian. Oh my gosh. So E flat minor Dorian, it's on the second, it's actually D flat major, but, starting over. So, and then the last set of 8 bars is D Dorian minor, so forth. Okay, so in the very first example, this is designed for the absolute beginner who is so afraid. What do I do when I hear this? This track you're going to hear this jazz pianist who's playing some nice, what they call comping, nice funky jazzy chords, and you're going to hear a bass player that's really good and a nice drummer, kind of what you'd hear professionally. And so here you are. This is Jazz Improv 101. What do I do? So I recommend, if you don't know how to play a Dorian minor scale,
Mm-hmm.
play it in long note, like whole notes.
Which is what this example
This
has
example
on the sheet
has.
music. Yeah.
So if we could play the, can we play a little bit of the track?
I'm going to count it in because it's going to start right on the music.
Okay.
1, 2, 1, 2, ready, and.
Now we're on the E flat minor. So now this is the third set of 8. I'm playing the D minor Dorian scale. Now we go back to F minor Dorian. So, this gets boring real fast. But at least in your ear, you're hearing that Dorian minor scale while these guys are jamming.
Yep.
So imagine you're just a clarinet player or a flute player, a trumpet player, just saying, you know, I want to find notes in that scale that go along with their chord progression. So start off just playing very simple notes. Now I'm going to make it a little bit more intricate. I'm getting fancier.
Right.
But I'm basically playing notes chosen from either the F Dorian minor chord scale or the E flat Dorian minor or the D minor. So that's the idea of, and of course I'm playing on top of what's already another piano player playing.
So you don't have to think about everything that's going on. It's just about learning the notes of the scale and getting really comfortable with those.
Of course now, I'm jumping, I'm advancing you real quickly, about 20 levels higher.
Right.
So what this recording is doing is just giving you a loop to practice with.
Yeah.
It goes through those 24 bars, 8 bars on F minor, 8 bars on E flat minor, 8 bars on D minor. And it's doing it several times, and it gives you 3 or 4 minutes of a chance just to play and listen in your ears. I mean, focusing on those harmonies and those coming up with your own melodic patterns, using notes from those scales.
Yep. It makes a lot of sense. And I see what you're saying, how that could seem kind of boring. But if you don't understand that scale, I would have listened to that and it would have taken me a few minutes to be like, okay, I can hear these 3 or 4 notes just with my ear training that I've had. Okay, I can hear there's an F in there, I can hear there's a B flat in there. And I'd be fumbling around. But when you have a book like this and you have a loop that's recorded, it helps you to focus on what's important. Here's the scale. Now just practice with that scale and you'll start to find some melodies and some riffs and some things that are more appropriate to the style, which we're going to get to that more in a minute here. So I think that's one of the things we've talked about is having something you can practice with. If you don't have someone to practice with, if you and I don't get to be together, but I have a loop, I have a recording of something that I can work with over time and get more and more intricate and really, really comfortable with, then I'm going to get more comfortable with that scale. I'm going to get more comfortable changing it up and doing something different. So I really like this example because I think it gives somebody a place to start when they really just aren't sure what to do.
Right.
It's really simple. It's very accessible. But like you said, you took it to a really complicated place really quick. So if you started to get comfortable with it and you found your groove in there, then you could just really go all over the place wherever you want to go with it, which is really cool.
Right.
So I really love that example. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
So why is it important that we understand characteristics of a style of music before we're improvising? So this had a very definitive jazz style to it. and you just talked about the scale and the Dorian and all of that.
And that's the example. And there might be some different scale. Maybe you're maybe doing a Lydian, a dominant Lydian scale. I mean, it can be overwhelming real quick to say, oh my gosh, how do I memorize all the scales? And once again, it's just starting with some basic scales and practice hearing it. It doesn't do any good to just memorize like a machine. What are the notes in a Dorian or a Phrygian or a Lydian or a Mixolydian? And then or they also have blues scales, everybody that learns to play, and the pentatonic, and a lot of music therapists learn that in their early musical training. So the point is that just get comfortable with a few simple, just a few of the scales or the modes, and don't just get comfortable where it becomes part of you, just like you're conversing.
Mm-hmm.
Just start playing notes and let it come naturally. And it's not like you have to. Here's another important point. You don't always have to just stick to notes in that scale. You can cheat a little bit. Right. And occasionally throw in some extraneous notes that kind of clash, because it adds contrast and adds dynamics to it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you got to have a little chaos in the music to make it interesting. Mm-hmm. You don't always have to have it real predictable at all times, and that's a real important concept to remember. And I think you were asking about why do we need to understand the characteristics of different styles?
Yeah, you just went from jazz, and then you kind of talked about the blues scale. So what are the elements there? How do we figure that out to know? How do we know, oh, that's blues, oh, that's jazz, oh, that's country, that's gospel? Like, where do we find that?
Okay. Now, in blues music, you typically using the blues scale a lot, but it's also like this is. Let me give an example of the blues scale again. Let's see. But you can do. But that's one common component of blues.
Right.
One of the other common things about blues is that you tend to have probably the most familiar type of blues is what we call a 12-bar blues.
Right.
So let's just say if you're in the key of, we're going to use the key of C major for example. If you can just remember this formula, think 14-11 is the first set of 4 bars of the 12 bars, and then you're going to the next set is going to be 44-11.
Okay.
For the second set of 8 bars, and then the third set is going to be 54-11. Okay, now what does that mean? So I'm just gonna, this is a very common progression you hear in blues. You're gonna hear, you know that in the key of C major that the C note is your tonic, is your 1 chord. C chord is they call it your 1 chord. Right. If you were to play an F major chord, that is called your 4 chord. And if you were to play a G major chord, that is called your 5 chord. So I'm going to just play a little blues riff, and I'm going to use this formula. So listen, right now I just want you just to think about those 3 sets of 4. And then we're going to talk about the approach to blues and how you feel blues and some of the rhythmic qualities of it. But just the rest. Right. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, 1. Now the second set of 4. Now we do 4, 4 chord, 1, 1. Now the third set of 5, 4, 1. And then that's all there is. That's 12 bars. We just did 12 bars. And then you just do a loop. Yeah, you just do it. So, but okay, but this is something, if you were to sit in with a blues band and you say, hey, let's all do let's do a blues jam. And music therapists do that. I know a lot of therapists like to use the blues. Just every,
That
what,
nice predictable structure, it just kind of
yeah.
keeps going. So if you get lost, you can always come back to it.
And by the way, there's two popular types of time signatures in blues in what I call 12 bar blues, and one of them is the standard one. And one we did is in 4/4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2. And the second 4 time. Okay, and notice that there is in blues. It's important to have a little, not just a straight beat, but more what they call a shuffle. A shuffle. So it's that swinging, the luck. So that's more, it sounds very square, very non-blues. That sounds more like somebody playing rock, trying to do a real simple rock riff, and that's another interesting thing in a lot of rock music, they don't go into the shuffle pattern more. They tend to do more of a straight particular, and the drummers, bum, 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 bum. So that's more of a rock feel. Right. So that's an important part. Just think of that shuffle thing. But as far as time signatures, you have the traditional 4/4, or you have what they call the 6/8 feel. Yeah. So listen to this: 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6.
Feels like there's
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2. So you hear that 6/8 groove. So some of the real laid back blues riffs you hear on B.B. King, I don't know, there's tons of John May, or we can go on a big name, a whole list of names of famous artists that love to play blues. It's just omnipresent. But anyway, so that 6/8 groove is a real popular thing. So one of the other things important about blues that I want to mention is that it needs to be not only have some of those familiar, maybe use some of those bluesy riffs from the blues scale, and maybe possibly a shuffle feel, and maybe that formula I just gave you, the 14/11, 44/11, 54/11, which is the standard 12-bar blues. Now there are other types of blues that we're going to demonstrate in a minute. Like you can do a 16-bar blues. Or you can do an 8-bar blues and all that, but the most common is 12-bar blues. But another thing about blues, it just needs to be, you just can't, it doesn't have to be metronomical. Too many people, don't be stiff. You let it be fluid and kind of, you can bend the beat a little bit. You can play behind the beat. What they call the flat 6 to the star. But that's the next lesson. You don't need to be overwhelmed by that. So it just has it just has to have that's a big thing about blues that I'm going to contrast with another music genre in a minute. That it just needs to be relaxed and almost like, hey baby, let's sing the blues. Hey, how are you doing today, honey? It's almost like you're carrying on conversation, and that's why I love singing, improvising, singing with just made up words in blues, because blues makes people happy. That's another thing about it. It doesn't. People tend to relax because of there's a freedom and a flow in it, and just once you learn these key components, learn your blues scale, learn some of your some of these chords you use and the different rhythms I've talked about. And most important, do just tons and tons of listening to other artists. I guarantee you, you will get inspired and you'll be able to do really good blues jamming in no time.
Yeah. Well, something I'm hearing you say is kind of a theme here, which if I think about using this with clients, which I've done, that the whole blues improv that you're talking about, where you ask somebody to just make up a sentence or say how they're feeling or whatever it is, like a call and response kind of thing in a session, we extend so much
Hmm.
kindness to our clients and patients that it takes them a second. There might be a latent response there before they come up with the thing that they're contributing. And as therapists, we always wait for them, right? We wait for them to make their contribution, and then we get back into the structure of the music. And what I'm hearing you say is to do the same thing for ourselves when we're learning how to improvise. We got a
Hmm.
little behind the beat. That's fine. We didn't quite get in the groove or in the pocket yet. That's also fine. We're not going to get there unless we give ourselves that kindness and that patience to just, well,
Right.
try it again, come back to it again, start over, or pick up where you left off. Because our brains need that time to process too. Just
Right.
like when we throw it at a client or a patient, they need a second. Like, oh, you just asked me to make up something on the spot. Okay, I need a second. And then they come up with it, and then we contribute and we keep going. So I really like that theme that I'm hearing so far. That like it doesn't have to be perfect. That phrase "practice makes perfect." That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about just getting comfortable with it and having fun with it because we're musicians and we want to enjoy the music we're
And
making.
that's another reason why, if you don't have access to live musicians to jam with, just make sure you get a lot of great loops, audio
Mm-hmm.
loops, because there's tons of them out there.
Mm-hmm.
Just let them go on and on forever. Do a 12-minute jam. I don't care. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it doesn't have to be, just let it play over and over again, and just it's just that practice makes perfect. But don't feel that you have to rush the process. If you get overwhelmed and you say I'm feeling uninspired, just take a break and then you'll come back to it. That's like learning anything. So that's
Well,
your.
there's a song that came to mind when we started having this conversation. It's a Lori Berkner song called I Know a Chicken, and it's got that call and response. I know a chicken, and she laid an egg.
Mhm.
She laid an egg.
Delay.
And I was thinking in my brain, like, even if I didn't have a loop, I could play that song, and my improvisation could be the response of the call and response. I hear her go, I know a chicken, and then I could play something on the piano to make up my own version of that repetition.
Absolutely, you're
And
you're
it could be just
absolutely
this
right.
very structured, like every time it's my turn to respond, I'm going to try to respond differently. And I might muck it up a few times. I might not quite find my spot right away. But it gives me some predictability and structure too of a song that I already know really well and use a lot in sessions where I can just take that and try to do something different with it and see if I can come
Hmm.
up with some different responses to kind of push me outside of my comfort zone because
Hmm.
that's already in sort of that blues pocket that song is. And so it makes me think that would be a really easy thing for me to go home right now and I could play that on my speaker without having to find a loop if I don't have access or if I'm just not sure what to look for. But we are
Hmm.
going to try to offer some suggestions in the show notes too. So if people aren't sure where to start looking for the loops, they've got some ideas. Okay, so we've been talking about loops and the importance of practicing with loops and finding something with some repetition to
Uh-huh.
help us get comfortable. So, could you share another one with us that would be helpful for somebody that's just learning about the blues, learning how to improvise, learning about jazz? What's another good one that we can use?
Uh, one of them, one of the tunes that for many years was like the number one beginning level jam tune that musicians played. It was a song composed by Herbie Hancock, very famous jazz artist back in, I think he was really popular in the 80s and the 90s. But there was a song called Watermelon Man.
Mm-hmm.
And you could take almost any jazz improv course in college level or even outside college, and they would use that song
Mm-hmm.
frequently for years. But so it's basically some of the same chords. I mean, the same blues chord type structure we've talked about before, except that it's not a 12 bar blues. It's actually 16 bars.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually have 8 bars is the first part of what we call the A theme, A
Mm-hmm.
section, and then we have the B section is actually six +2 as a tag on the end. And this will make, I know it sounds confusing now, but I think the only way to do it is to demonstrate. And before you play the track, let me just play it without the track so you can see what I'm talking about. So this first part is the A theme, and I'm going to play it in the key of F major.
Okay.
So, we're going to use the 1 chord, which is an F chord with some blues embellishment. And then we're going to go to the 4 chord, which is B flat. And then we're going to go back to the F chord, the 1 chord. And then we're going to go to the 5 chord, which is the C. And then back to the 4, which is the B flat, and then the F. All right. So I'm just going to play, this is going to be total of 16 bars. And so this is the first 8 bars is what we call the A section of that theme. So here we go. 2, 3, 4. 2, bar 3. 4, 5, excuse me, 6, 7, 8. Now we go to what we call the second half, which is the second set of 8 bars. We call it the B section, and it starts on a C chord. B flat, C. On bar 14 is where we just do a staccato note and we break and allow some other musician jamming along to throw in a little fill. And then after that, then you have 2 bars at the end of it. So let me let's just play it. Can we play with the track? And
yeah, let's do it.
Here we go.
You ready? All right, we're gonna improvise together again. Here we go. Again from the top. This is the second loop. I'm going to add a little, keep on. It's more fun when you got 2 people jamming together. So I'm adding some of my own creative fills. Great. Now start another loop. Begin. All day. That was awesome. You did amazing. Great. All right.
Now you see you're getting it.
Already.
You feel better already. See, it's literally like dialogue, like we're conversing.
Yeah.
And if people can realize that, and here's another important point.
Yeah.
I preach this to all musicians. Don't compare yourself to someone else. Don't think that someone else sets the bar. Sometimes some of the most emotionally touching music performances I've heard are the most simplest, laid back. For example, have you heard of Nora Jones?
Yeah. Yep.
If you listen to any of Nora Jones's great recordings, she tends to be very sparing and very sparse in her
Yeah.
company.
There's a lot of space.
And sometimes she just hits single notes. She doesn't do fancy, big, fat chords. She just does simple little riffs. But every note has its place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the beauty of musicianship. It doesn't matter how simple, you've got to find your own personality and
Yeah.
be proud of it and develop your own personality. Don't try to imitate someone else. That's all I got to say. And you'll be happier. And the other people will be happier too, because I like to hear people like what we just did on Watermelon Man. I enjoy hearing the Elizabeth personality coming out at that moment. It's like, that's what I want to hear. Just be yourself. That's all there is to it.
Right. Well, and it's something that I'm not as comfortable with because I was trained classically and I'm a more structured, reserved person by nature most of the time. So I do have to push myself more to go into that improvisatory zone because that's not my comfort zone. Same thing as if I went to a wedding and someone asked me to go out on the dance floor, I'd be like, can we do it when they do the chicken dance? Because then I know what to do. But it's really good for me to go out there and not do the chicken dance and go out when it's just everybody being loose because I learn so much from that. I get more comfortable and I get out of my own head, which is what a lot of us tend to do. We get in our heads or imposter syndrome creeps in and we think, well, I'm not like so-and-so. I'm probably not actually supposed to do this. I probably don't actually have the skills to do this. I'm kidding myself, which music therapists do that a lot. And so I think just pushing yourself and allowing yourself to make those mistakes is just really good. It feels really good. It felt good just now to just do that, knowing I was probably going to play a few notes that I might think were sour if I went back to listen to it.
And I cannot tell you mentioned the word mistakes. Sometimes getting out of the formula or doing something like that's considered an accidental wrong, or you think is a wrong note. There are so many classic examples, and I don't have time to prepare that list of some very famous recordings that what was played on the recording was an accident. It wasn't intended, but it sounded so good at the time that now it's legendary. I mean, there's some legendary riffs where the guys just kind of hit a weird note, but everybody is endeared to that. And that might be a whole other topic. Maybe I should come up with my collection of famous pieces that we've all heard. Because where the note that you heard in the recording was not the original intended note. I mean, it seemed like a mistake. So the moral of that story is be happy with what you think of mistakes, or it says, because as you play something that sounds weird, let it evolve to what happens next. Just get back on track or go somewhere else. I mean,
Yeah,
Anyway.
absolutely.
Um,
So I think it'd be great if we did kind of a little comparison of a couple different genres or styles so that you can kind of help us to understand more about how we can find our groove in a certain style of music. So do you have something that you can
yes.
share with
Okay.
us?
So what I want to use one of my favorite songs by a guy named Bill Withers called "Ain't No Sunshine," and I'm going to sing a little bit of that. But here's some things that I want you to think about when I'm going to play you a real quick comparison of two different styles, and one of them is more the traditional bluesy feel. And J.J. Wheeler, who has the site about learning how to improvise in different styles of music, he makes this really. I'm just going to read what he says. This is his concluding comments about when he talks about improvising in a blues style. And he says, in terms of basic stylistic traits, blues music tends to be quite simple, with the aim of conveying a tale of sorrow, hardship, or regret as clearly as possible. The style generally has a laid-back feel, although more upbeat variations occur in subgenres such as boogie woogie and then use of techniques such as slides, slurs, note bends, and breathy, softer tones can create an effective blues sound. So like if you're playing guitar or harmonica or something like that, you can do, a lot of these slides and slurs. That's another thing that's indicative you would find in many blues type recordings. And so now so keep that in mind when I sing my first version of Ain't No Sunshine, and then I'm going to go into what I call more funk version. Now, people say, well, what is funk? Well, funk is something that's generally a little bit edgier. It's kind of related to what you'd hear in pop music, rock music, R&B, um, jazz. I mean, you could take any other genre, blues, jazz, I mean, all this stuff, even country,
Yeah.
and you can add a funk element. So what does funk mean? It basically means that there's a little bit, if I was to summarize it in a real simplistic term, it has a lot more edge to it. There is more conscientiousness in funk of being in the pocket, where
Yeah.
you just feel this groove. It's a little bit deeper, a little bit sharper, more pronounced groove. So beat placement. Also, sometimes playing behind the beat is an indicative thing of funk. And it has also a more explosive, it's a little bit more extravagant, if I can say, than maybe a laid back blues. So it'll make more sense when I actually play the song. So
Let's
I'm going
see
to
if
sing.
we can hear the difference.
Yeah, so I'm going to play a little bit of Ain't No Sunshine. So I just want to sing the first verse just for those that have ever not familiar with the song. And I'm going to play it a little bit straight first, just so you can get familiar with the tune. Ain't no sunshine where she's gone. I'm just playing a very straight version. It's not warm when she's away. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone, and she's always gone too long. Anytime she goes away. Okay, that's just the first verse, and that's enough for illustration. Now, this time I'm just going to play the melodies. I'm not going to sing it, but I'm going to try to put a real relaxed bluesy quality based upon what I just spoke about blues. So here we go. Does that feel bluesy to you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Very recognizable.
Okay.
100%.
Now I'm going to shift to a more funky quality.
All right.
Taking the same. So see if you
bring
can
the
feel.
funk.
This is a funk. Also listen to that bass, a little bit heavier bass. You hear it in hip hop music, more funky R&B. Notice how it has more of I hope I'm portraying this musically, that your listeners is hearing that, but it should definitely feel edgier, a little bit sharper pointed, more explosive accents, but yet even funk does have its very, you can still be laid back. So, the important thing with funk, you don't want it to be stiff.
Yeah.
You don't want to be thinking about being so edgy and sharp accents that you make it stiff. You still have to relax and just imagine you're at a party dancing along some rhythm disco or R&B or maybe some kind of a hip hop groove, and that's going to help you get into a funk style. So, and be in that pocket. Listen to the generally it tends to have a real stronger bass line. So
and maybe that would be the helpful thing, if you feel comfortable doing your own kind of recording and stuff, is to come up with a bass line for something and that's your loop. It's just that funky
Right.
bass line that just is really consistent, and
Yeah.
you're hitting the beat every time, and then you focus
Yeah.
on what's happening with your right hand, and then maybe you flip it another time, and the bass is where you're going to start to explore a little bit, because I know a lot of us, the left hand work can be really overwhelming, and it's hard to be like, okay, well, what do I do with the bass line other than 1 4 5 1? And that's a whole nother level of improvisation, right? To start get your left hand to be a little more comfortable, because I know that's one of my goals as a music therapist. I feel like my left hand is less developed in the land of improv, and I really want to build that more with bass lines. So that kind of makes me feel inspired to play around with this song and see what I can find.
Sure.
That was really cool. Well, we are running out of time, Harry. So before we end our time together, are there any last little tips that you would want us to know? Because we've talked about a lot of things today. What do you want to leave our listeners with to help them feel inspired to really explore improvisation more?
Boy, yeah. Let me just try to summarize in a few minutes. Let me just, I have one important thing I want to take home
Okay.
from this. When you hear of all that we're doing today, you hear a structure. We talked about structure, 12-bar blues, 16-bar blues, or a funk style, accents, using the Dorian scale. I mean, I talked about a lot of things. Those are the elements of structure. And it's important to add that to your vocabulary. But it's also fun to have this chaos element.
Yeah.
Part of what I was doing, I was getting almost a little out of control on some of my funk. But it's pleasant chaos. It's fun. It's like teasing the air. And the point I want to make, all human beings innately desire structure at the basis of everything they do. And this goes outside of music. No, if you're learning to play tennis, I don't care. If you're learning to do, a sport, or learning to do a job or anything like that, people want to know, well, what are the basic rules, or what's the basic pattern here, and that's okay. Right. But what makes life interesting is, and where you get your individual, people also like personality. The point is that I think you want to strive to where you have a balance of structure and a little bit of chaos. That you can have chaos and a lack of direction. But remember, it's only part of the equation. You can make progress if you have at least, I say, 50% structure. And that's no golden rule. It doesn't have to be exactly 50%.
It's a place to start.
It's a place to start and do that. So that's something I would also say. Another thing I want to tell people is, and I mentioned this before, listen to lots of music. And then practice. But by practicing, make it an enjoyable event. If you find a duet partner to practice, or if you're just practicing by yourself, listening to a loop, always try to enjoy the moment. If I was to play Mary Had a Little Lamb, I'm going to be facetious here. I'm going to have a real profoundly joyful experience. I'm going to demonstrate.
Okay.
I could be real stiff. Get my drift. Now I'm going to immerse myself
and
Mary Had a Little Lamb. No, I'm going to add a sense of ebullient joy in this. Am I correct? You probably got a different emotional reaction as a listener to the second version than the first one.
Absolutely, yeah.
And even though the second was still pretty simple, but that's my motto. Enjoy the notes. Savor every note that you play, whether you're improvising a simple pattern or a complex pattern, and you
Yeah.
will be happier as a person
Mhm.
and a happier musician, and you will be well on your way to becoming a great improviser if you do those.
Awesome. Well, I think that this is a great starting place for anybody that's listening that just feels a little overwhelmed by this idea, but really wants to learn more and really wants to find the joy in music. If you've been a music therapist for any amount of time, you go through those stages where you start to lose some of the joy because you tend to do the same things. And so pushing yourself to learn a new skill is one of those ways where you can bring the joy back. And you can remember why you did this to begin with, because we love music, because we find joy in making music and connecting with other people. And so I'm excited to get to work. I've got a piano at home. I'm excited to take these tips and start practicing more. I'm excited to have you back and for us to turn this into more of a series and to explore more of this skill, explore more about improvisation and jazz, because I think there's much, much more to learn. So thank you for coming on the show and for sharing so much of your heart and your skill and your passion, because I know that a lot of people are going to benefit from it.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, and I share your joy and enthusiasm, and I feel your passion too, and your drive not only to learn, but you've got a wonderful personality that comes across in just who you are as a person, but in your music as well. And so trust that
Yes.
joy.
I'm
And
going to trust.
life is that's a process. It's always evolving.
Exactly.
Right?
Trust the process. We say that about so many things, and it's so true.
Don't worry about the end result.
No. Process, not product.
Exactly.
The classic
Amen.
music therapy mantra. We're going to remember that.
Amen. Yes.
Awesome. Well, wonderful to have you,
Thank
Harry.
you.
Thank you, as
Thank you.
always.
For show notes and resources in today's episode and all episodes, head to our website, musictherapyandbeyond.com. Reach out to us at musictherapyandbeyond@gmail.com and follow us on social media to stay up to date on all the content and announcements. We'll see you next time.